gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be, to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Country continues to make efforts to deal with the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, and the Senate continues to place on record its appreciation to all the persons who are involved in this effort, specifically and particularly persons in the medical field who are considered frontline persons. And of course, we highlight those persons who many of us didn't hear about before, but certainly we appreciate now their role. The persons who are involved in what is referred to as contact tracing. Contact tracing. So we develop a new lexicon around the fight, but certainly we register our appreciation. And of course, we ask God to continue to bless the country and the persons who are burdened with the responsibility for identifying policies and strategies for dealing with the difficulties and the fight against this, what is referred to as an unseen enemy. In my humble view, the country is certainly putting up a valiant effort to restrict the advance of this pandemic and to weigh the various interests in society and to ensure that we can contain this epidemic. So all those who are involved in the fight physically and those who are responsible for the policy and the implementation of the policy, we ask God's continued guidance. Statements by ministers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I had undertaken to provide an update on the activities of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in respect of Jamaicans overseas. And while I had thought that I might not be able to get that done for this week, I am in fact ready to present such a statement. Mr. President, it bears repeating that the Ministry
You'll always remember that day you became a parent. That day, you made yourself a promise to provide for them, to protect them, laugh with them, watch them learn, and let them grow. That day, you realized your biggest challenge lies in bringing them up in a world full of choices. That day, you knew they would grow up fast, and the innocence you cherish wouldn't last. That day, you made up your mind that no matter how things change, you would always take the time to give them parental guidance. That day is today.
Remember, parental controls are available for all devices. A reminder from the Broadcasting Commission.
There's a long-distance relay that's still on. Many have taken it this far, each leg as important as the next, each challenge faced with determination. Now it's your turn to take the baton. People living with HIV and AIDS and those who are vulnerable need your commitment. It stands in the way of a better quality of life for all of us and our self-respect as a region. It stands in the way of victory in the fight to stop the spread of HIV. Reject stigma and discrimination. Get us to zero.
The corrupt are getting away too often. Help catch them now. Jamaicans must call 1-800-CORRUPT.
Yes!
Enforce the law. One law for all. If convicted and found guilty, lock them up. It's our money that's being wasted. Lock them up. Stop the corruption. Build integrity. A message from National Integrity Action.
I do have a dream, and I know you have a dream, that we can make Jamaica the place of choice for you to choose to live, to work, to do business.
We are going for the Jamaica we want. Making steady progress to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in our National Development Plan, Vision 2030 Jamaica. We have teamed up with valued partners, working through strong institutions to reduce inequalities in our society. We commit to being responsible in our production and consumption, ensuring we build sustainable communities in harmony with nature. Jamaica is making significant strides in providing quality, lifelong education for all, enabling our people to be engaged in decent work to drive economic growth, equipping men and women with the skills to build resilient infrastructure, promote sustainable industry, foster innovation, and utilize new technologies. Urgent action is being taken to manage natural resources responsibly, protecting clean water sources, ensuring access to water and sanitation for all, diversifying to alternative energy sources, conserving our environment and sustaining life below water and on land. Jamaica is making moves to ensure healthy lifestyles for the well-being of our people. We're promoting sustainable agriculture to achieve food security, improve nutrition, and end extreme hunger, putting in the work to end poverty in all its forms. We're on track in achieving our Sustainable Development Goals through realizing our Vision 2030 Jamaica. We will leave no one behind.
And I'm chilling right now, cause we're winning right now.
Did you miss the broadcast of Telethon Jamaica Together We Stand? Join us right here on Monday, May 25 from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. for highlights of Telethon Jamaica Together We Stand. This will give you yet another chance to join some of Jamaica's leading artists and personalities in making a donation towards the purchase of urgently needed personal protective equipment for healthcare and frontline workers. That's highlights of Telethon Jamaica, Together We Stand, right here on this channel on Monday, May 25 from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Together We Stand in support of our frontline workers. Tune in and make your donation.
Stigma can prevent some people from seeking medical care, especially for COVID-19 related symptoms. So it's very important to avoid stigmatization. You can help to avoid this by understanding that words matter. You know, sticks and stones will break your bones, and words can hurt emotionally. So do talk about the new coronavirus, but don't attach home addresses or ethnicity to the disease. Do talk about people who have COVID-19, those who recovered, but don't dwell on people who died after contracting COVID-19. Don't refer to people with the virus as victims. Instead, you can talk about people acquiring or contracting the disease. Do share accurate information about risks like not practicing social distancing and preventative measures. Do obey government protocols and advisory, as they can save your life and those around you. And encourage others to do the same. Don't repeat or share information that is not confirmed or words that spread fear.
If you discover a large fire within a building, sound the alarm. Leave the building immediately. Proceed to the assembly point. Ensure that the fire department is called and report to the person in charge of roll call. And don't return to the building unless instructed. Educate yourself.
Is you can protect yourself and your family from coronavirus or COVID-19. A face mask is one method used to prevent the spread of disease. They do so by reducing the spread of germs. When you cough, sneeze, or talk, you release tiny droplets in the air that may infect others. Please remember, disposable masks must be used once, then thrown into a garbage can. To put your mask on, wash your hands for 20 seconds with soap and water. Check if there are any visible tears or holes on the mask. If there are none, hold the mask by the ear loops. Place a loop around each ear, then pinch or bend the stiff edge to the shape of your nose. Pull the bottom of the mask over your chin. If you have a face mask with a band, hold the mask in your hand by the nosepiece with your fingertips. You will see the headband hanging freely. Bring the mask to your nose level, then pull the top strap over your head. When it is time to remove the face mask, wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. You can also use a hand sanitizer to clean your hands. Whatever you do, make sure you don't touch the front of the mask. Remember, the front of the mask is contaminated. If you have the face mask with a band, lift the band over your head to remove the mask. If you have a face mask with ear loops, only touch the ear loops. Hold both of the ear loops and gently lift and remove the mask from your face. Throw the mask in the garbage, then wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. Protect yourself and your family from COVID-19.
The corrupt are getting away too often. Help catch them now. Jamaicans must call 1-800-CORRUPT.
Yes!
Enforce the law. One law for all. If convicted and found guilty, lock them up. It's our money that's being wasted. Lock them up. Stop the corruption. Build integrity. integrity. A message from National Integrity Action.
In Jamaica, there needs to be one law for all. Every member of this society, regardless of profession, finances, or the area you live in.
I have some bad news.
The company didn't get the contract?
The money they paid us for it has gotten out.
Are you serious?
I'm afraid so, and I understand that there are going to be corruption charges.
Minister, please come with us, sir.
Breaking news. A senior politician and senior civil servant have been charged for corruption.
Thank God not all of them stay, sir.
Build integrity. One law for all.
A message from NIA.
People have it to say, well, because you have a disability, you probably not have much sense.
And people look for me and tell me that it's you're handicapped, and they not say what's wrong with me. And
some of them used to laugh at me and make fun of me and all that.
People just make it look like some of the students them have disability cannot do anything.
Monday evening that I'm going home, I go on the bus and I give the driver my fare. I show him my ID. He said, what about not ID this? I show me. I said, government give me my ID to show me that I must pay the $80 on the bus. And he said, no, you need to pay the full amount.
If you look at them, they don't look special, but after having them in your company for 2 to 5 minutes, you will realize just how challenging it is, and this work calls for a whole lot of patience and love.
They have challenges with their abilities, with their intellect. They have challenges with communication. They have challenges with socialization. They live in an other adaptive skill.
People used to call me handicapped boy, and I cry so many times, back and forth, going to school.
They need to be included, they need to achieve, they need to enjoy, they need to be well. Intellectual disability is not a mental illness.
Persons with intellectual disabilities have a right, and they want to contribute to the society in general.
I wanted us show me the ropes, I will complete it.
Don't bother feel say the person with a disability cannot help themselves around other people.
Persons with intellectual disabilities are excellent workers if given the opportunity.
I'm an all working man, and they say when an all working man is at the workplace, they don't want to lose. Then he doing best and do good in job.
It's like I'm the star here. Yeah, I'm the star here. So right now, everyone just look up to me. Different.
To achieve these goals, individuals with intellectual disabilities must be given the necessary support in the work environment to maximize their full potential while adding value to the world of work.
10% of Jamaicans are disabled, and the disability bill will allow for all persons to make a contribution to economic growth and national development.
I've been swimming since I was a child. I have been to China, and I achieved 1 gold, 2 silver and a bronze. And in Cayman, I got the silver and the trophy for the open water. And when I went back to Cayman again, I got the gold.
I take part in all Special Olympics, World Winter Games, World Summer Games, from From 1997 to 2013. I competed in floor hockey, roller skating, figure skating, football, track and field.
We here at Jamaica program has been going for the past, I would say, we are close to 35 years now. And we have over 4,000 persons in all 14 parishes in Special Olympics Jamaica.
My dream is to be a good swimmer, professional swimmer, so I can go like to other Olympics and do what other people do, all my friends do. So yeah, I'm hoping to get there.
I've been selected to bring the torch for the Special Olympics for Summer Games 2015. And I feel good.
The most common reason, or two of the reasons why they are usually excluded, is because of their disability and the lack of support that they receive from others.
It is like a race. If you want to win, even if you get the button last, pick it up and finish it until you drop, you have to go pick it up.
I always tell myself, Kadian, you know what is right. Follow your dream.
Someone with disability could be your brother or your sister or one of your uncle, anybody. You have to just deal with them right. Give us a chance, we can do it.
I am Jamaican.
I am JDF Coastguard.
I am an infantry soldier.
I am JDF Irwin.
I am
a JDF soldier.
Hello world, my name is Darianne. Journey with me inside the lives of some incredible people as we find out some of the life experiences that shaped them and made them into who they are. Inside their journey with Darianne. Coming soon to PBCJ.
My name is Go Williams. I'm in the construction business. Our motto is to move the earth to please, but I always acknowledge and know that the earth can move as it pleases. Poor building techniques, poor materials, and shoddy workmanship lead to disasters. Earthquakes don't kill people, disasters do. And we should make sure that we don't contribute to it by building poor buildings. Build right, build smart.
To learn more, log on to www.weready.org.
An important message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. How to wash your hands. Firstly, wet your hands. Then apply some soap. Rub your hands palm to palm. Lather the backs of your hands. Scrub between your fingers. Rub the backs of fingers on the opposing palms. Then clean your thumbs. Make sure to wash your fingernails and fingertips. Rinse your hands. Then dry with a single-use towel. Use this towel to turn off the faucet. And now your hands are clean. When to wash your hands? After coughing or sneezing, after taking public transportation, when caring for the sick, before, during, and after you prepare and eat food, after toilet use, when hands are visibly dirty, after handling animals or animal waste. An important message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
We know times are hard,
But can selling your vote really make a difference in your life? How many of them even remember you and your community? What you need is opportunity for yourself and for your children. Don't sell your vote. It is illegal. Respect your vote. Vote for opportunity. A message from USAID Comet 2, NIA, and partners.
I'm so lonely. You're not afraid of the dark, are you? Don't be afraid. Come with me.
Please, no! Oh my God, please, no!
There's a long-distance relay that's still on. Many have taken it this far, each leg as important as the next, each challenge faced with determination. Now it's your turn to take the baton. People living with HIV and AIDS and those who are vulnerable need your commitment. It stands in the way of a better quality of life for all of us and our self-respect as a region. It stands in the way of victory in the fight to stop the spread of HIV. Reject stigma and discrimination. Get us to zero.
I was raped at the age of 9 by my stepfather. In that family, it was as if something went wrong, you are to be blamed for it. When I came into EVE program, it was different. I learned to get in touch with my feelings, my true feelings. You have a counselor on board, a psychologist on board who speaks to you and you can relate to her. They make you to understand that there's a life after. The mentor moms now, as big sisters, have to look out for the little sisters and all that.
She told me that her stepfather abused her too. She told me that not to blame myself for what happened to me. Most of the time, my mother used to cuss me and say, "You go have sex with man, give me this and I can't come in yard."
My mother and I couldn't relate to nothing at all. She even tried to beat me when she found out that I was raped. When I think about things we could share together, she's not here, so I don't want another teenager to lack that.
She said to me that my mother do not know my feelings, so we have to sit down and talk about each other so we can know each other's feelings. Yeah, she helped me a lot with my mother.
What we have is that we have these young women who are teenage mothers and who, by virtue of the things that they've learned in the program, were now able to take back their lives and teach other young women the skills that were required to have them get back on track. Young people in Jamaica need more. Young people in Jamaica need more information. If you talk to us about sex, it doesn't mean that we're going to have sex.
It's very important to have a bond with the child, explain to them from very early what can happen. Nobody only talk about belly, what about the STIs? They're out there, teach them about STIs. Instead of cursing them and talk about man, I go breed them, sit them down, show them how to put on a condom. My daughter, she's now 7. I talk to her about good touch, bad touch, and because most times it's the family members who does the damage. So then I reinforce in her not only strangers should you be afraid of. I teach her to trust me enough that she can come to me and tell me anything.
We also work with armed children. We include partners of the girls. We include family members. We provide counseling for other relatives. We do community sensitization. Eagerness, I think, was one of the qualities that defined Rochelle. She was going to make sure that being a teenage mother did not derail her opportunities to get back in school and to contribute.
For somebody who has been raped, don't stop there. Maybe it's hurting, yes, but you can get help. I don't think less of myself, I think higher. I want to aim for the sky.
What happened, Tristan?
Mommy, what is an activate?
Activate? Where you hear that word?
A lady was on the TV and she said she is a children's activate.
Oh, the advocate.
That's what I said.
Okay. The children's advocate is the person who makes sure that people know and respect the rights of children. She also makes sure that they are protected. She makes sure that even the government does its job properly when it comes to kids.
Children have rights too, Mommy?
Of course.
So, Mommy, do I have the rights to a little ice cream?
Right now, you have the right to go to bed.
Be an advocate for children's rights. An invitation from the Office of the Children's Advocate.
I just want to say hi to all my friends. For those who don't know me, I'm Gabriel. Let's get started using our problem-solving skills to create something that will help our families using supplies we can find around our homes. The experts say washing hands with soap and water reduces our chance of getting COVID-19. But if soap and water are not available, you can use a hand sanitizer. My mommy and others have been saying that this has become very expensive and hard to get. Give them a surprise when they get home this evening. Surprise them with a bottle of homemade hand sanitizer. Use a hand sanitizer with at least 70% alcohol. All you need to make the hand sanitizer is in your home. You will need a bottle of rubbing alcohol, aloe vera gel, or the real aloe vera you can pick from your garden, and some essential oil. I found peppermint in the cupboard, so I will use that. While I wait on you to get the stuff needed, take a look at what we can do to safeguard ourselves and everyone else from COVID-19.
The good news is you can protect yourself and your family against the coronavirus called COVID-19. We touch lots of things every day, like doorknobs, phones, keyboards, tables, cupboard drawers, refrigerator door, and light switches. Don't touch these things unless you absolutely have to. One way to lower the risk of getting the virus is to wipe down everything at the start of the day. Clean frequently touched surfaces and objects at home, like doorknobs, with disinfectant or soap and water. Once done, wash your hands properly. Protect yourself and your parents from the coronavirus or COVID-19.
Welcome back. So we are ready to make our hand sanitizer. Let's do this. First, you fill over a half or 3/4 of the bottle with rubbing alcohol. Then, you fill the remaining of that with aloe vera gel. Then, you pour your peppermint essential oil in it. And lastly, you shake it. And this is how you make your own homemade hand sanitizer.
Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear scrubs, masks, gloves, boots, and some may even carry a stethoscope. Let's acknowledge our local heroes, our nurses, doctors, paramedics, technicians, soldiers, and our police officers. What makes them unsung heroes? They are selfless. They risk their lives for others daily and commit to putting others before themselves. There are many other persons who are also essential in these unprecedented times, to include you. Yes, you! Thank you for playing your part as we fight this pandemic. Your efforts to stay home and to abide by the measures implemented do not go unnoticed. Please continue to help us keep you safe.
As an inner city youth, I'm a duty to know my rights. Not because you see me on the corner, you are going to abuse me.
I have a life to live. I deserve to be heard and respected. I know my rights. Do you? Know your laws. Know your rights. Respect you.
If you discover a large fire within a building, sound the alarm, leave the building immediately. Proceed to the assembly point. Ensure that the fire department is called and report to the person in charge of roll call. And don't return to the building unless instructed. Educate yourself.
Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Luxury, do not first class if you don't want. But the idea that they're not entitled to a luxury return where food is provided to them. So I just say that. The second obligation I want to mention, Minister, And I say, Mr. Let me be clear. We're not being contentious here. But I was offended by your comment that is not a luxury flight when the people, our people, complain about food. I was offended, and maybe it's an opportunity not to tear me apart, but to say the comment was taken out of context, and you apologize for making it, because it has offended a lot of people. And it's not being contentious. I'm just telling you, the no luxury flight was offended. It was as offensive as the comment which says that we can't let them loose on the population. And I noticed the Observer had an editorial that addressed both statements. I support the Observer editorial, and I hope that the government, in reflecting, just as the government apologized for what happened by will do the necessary apology to the people. The second limb of the Maritime Labour Convention, why it is so important, is our duty as a country, our duty, our obligation, our responsibility to take in the ship workers. It's not only that the employers must bring them. We have a duty to take them in. So if the employer wants to bring them, but we refuse to take them, we are breaching our international obligation under the Maritime Labour Convention. And that is why, if it's a matter of communication, the communication was terrible. These people on the ships were not communicated in a way for them to know what is being done. The uncertainty, the stress that they were put under was too great and undeserving as Jamaicans, when we have an obligation under the convention that we signed and ratified, the 2006 Maritime Labour Convention, to tell them that we're taking it in, to tell them what we're doing. It's not enough to tell them we were quietly and secretly having discussion from the 21st of April. So it's important, the omission of the Maritime Labour Convention in the context of 25% or thereabout of the people registering is noted in the statement. It's just couldn't make a statement without putting it. Means there's some questions that I think the people of the country may be interested in. Some of the people involved are students. Those in Barbados have publicly, or some from Barbados have publicly criticized the government. As some in China before had done. I don't know all the facts, and I'm not going to criticize the government on it. But the fact that they didn't know and they were criticizing us is again a failure of the government to properly communicate to our people in the diaspora as to what was going on. And talking about students, Minister, from your statement...
Sorry, Senator Brown, I take it now that is...
I'm going to questions. Yeah. From your statement on page 6, you spoke to the work of the embassy in China. This week there was a press story about Jamaicans being abused in China. And this comes against a background of complaints about Africans being maltreated and racist response to them in China. I don't know if your ministry have received any report. If you have, you could share with us on what measures we're taking to mitigate. China is our friend. They ought not to treat our people so, if the allegation is true, as our brothers and sisters in Africa have made it clear to them, this is unacceptable. So I raised that about the Chinese. You indicate, Minister, that funds are to be made available to your ministry as an emergency. That's on page 3 of the statement. said you identified and paid for accommodation for a number of nationals. Can the minister share with us the total sum allocated for this emergency and how much of that money was spent? Because it can't be that money was sent and we don't know how much and on what it was spent for. The country deserves to know that. So if the minister would be kind enough to deal with that China question and the issue of the funds expended, funds released and that amount expended in this thing. So, in closing, could you tell us also of the other ship workers, what's the timetable for bringing them back? What's the timetable for bringing back the 9,000 who have applied to come back? And I raised these questions about the timetable against the background that the country is told we're going to be reopened on the 1st of June. So I guess immigration officer must go back out. Everybody must go back out. So, but in any event, we're told by some companies that June 4th, tourists will be welcomed back into the country. So if the tourists are going to be welcomed back, does the control return policy, which includes a 14-day quarantine, will that be applied to the 5 days or 7 days of sea, sun, and whatever other S you wish to find? Smoke, yes, smoke. That's a longer one than the one I was thinking of. All right? But the issue is, are we reopening to tourists? And does that...
Senator Brown, that's the question. I'm just trying to get it clear. You're asking about the timetable for the persons coming in.
That's one.
That's one. Then you're asking, are we what?
Reopening to the world and to the tourists.
On the 4th
and
of
how
June.
does that fit in with the control re-entry policy?
All right.
I'll stop at those. A question that I had written down. One other question. But before I get to that question, allow me, Minister, to join you in congratulating the EU for their continued support to us. I think this week they gave us a number of equipment, and we thank the representatives of the EU. You mentioned in your speech, Minister, telethon to come. The country wants to know what has happened to the telethon that has passed, and what is the status of that resources collected. Have that gone to the frontline workers?
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Senator is quite correct when he notes that the statement has not focused on the ship workers. Save to mention, of course, that there are 1,044 aboard the Adventure of the Seas, which is currently 1,056, currently docked at the Falmouth Pier. And accordingly, by Monday, we can say that approximately 50% of the ship workers who work across the globe will have returned home. There is a timeline that is currently being worked on for the next 3 ships which are in queue, and this will be announced in due course. The fact is that I did not include this subject matter in this statement because it is one on which the Prime Minister will update the nation in short order, and in respect of which we are in discussions about a timetable. So for me to make an announcement now would be premature and it would be inappropriate. And so I ask for the Senator's understanding in recognizing that that information will be shared in short order, and clearly all the details that will be allowed to or that are relevant to that situation will also be shared as well. We know that our colleague, Senator Samuda, has been literally on the ground and participating in overseeing and implementing the logistics that are part of this extremely resource-intensive process of repatriating our nationals. I think sometimes we don't do the issue credit when we position it as something which is extremely simple and uncomplicated, and you know, the fact that it is not done in the snap of a finger must mean that you are treating it with disregard rather than a healthy respect for the need to bring our nationals home in a safe manner and in a manner which protects the safety of and health of our entire population. So when a ship indicates its willingness to come, but does not give the requisite assurance about timing, which accords with the capacity of the very same public health workers who we support and praise every day, we must ask that they agree with us the arrangements to be made and the timing so that we don't overwhelm our public health system. When a ship indicates that it's willing to come, then, and they don't tell us about their sanitization protocols or the COVID status of their ship, then we must ask for the appropriate information to be provided in due course, again, to ensure the safety not only of the workers coming home, but the very same family and friends and community to which they intend to return. We have had to make sure that we are working on these processes even as the pandemic has unfolded, even as we have been dealing with our outbreaks here. And it's the same public health system. So while we've been working on increasing the capacity, increasing trained personnel to be able to address all of the matters that are relevant, health, security, testing, contact tracing, community oversight, public sensitization, not only to mention where you have had the communities that have been quarantined as a result of outbreaks. These are all matters that have been taking place in parallel and not for any disregard. So we have never refused any ship, let me state that for the record. We have not taken any action which is in breach of the International Maritime Labour Convention. And in fact, it is in fact one of the issues which we raise with the shipping lines, even as we express our appreciation for their adherence to the convention by taking due care of our nationals while they have ceased to operate, and ensuring that they return to their home port as required under the convention. Mr. President, I just want to, without going further on that, because as I've stated, the Prime Minister will update on the timelines, but simply to state for the record that the government is working on scheduling the repatriation of the remaining seafarers out there. And again, this is across 9 ship lines, and you know, I would say easily more than 115 ships, some of which are being consolidated even as we speak. And even that, because he's speaking about the mixing of populations, is an issue as between the ships and their respective status. So this is a highly complex matter, and we do our people a disservice when we oversimplify it. So thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to touch very quickly on the matter of the recent press story about the Jamaican in China. And I wish to start by saying I only wish the journalist had reached out to the ministry to ask if we were aware of this case, or that they had reached out to the embassy, who the young man had stated in his interview did nothing to help him, because they would have had an extremely different set of facts provided to them. Mr. President, I don't wish to go into the details of the case because I don't think it would be appropriate. But I think that it's important that when these stories are carried to the public, that even the most basic of due diligence be done by asking a question. Because the circumstances experienced by the young man, and we cannot comment on how he felt about what was being done, but the embassy provided him guidance, advice which he refused to accept, Mr. President, sometimes circumstances arise which can have different outcomes based on our personal conduct of the matters. And again, in a situation where there are so many circumstances that are legitimately deserving of support, attention, and redress, it's important that the media play their part by asking questions, by checking facts before they put out stories that do not, in fact, reflect the story. So the embassy has been doing their best. More than 600 Jamaicans there, and it's a very small team of 4, and supported by headquarters and the newly established Jamaican Association in China, which has as its president the Asia representative of the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council. Broad support has been given to our Jamaicans, even including care packages with items which we were lucky enough to have left over from the expo, that was attended by the government delegation in last November. And it's very unfortunate that the embassy's function and capacity was presented in such a negative light when they did everything that they could have. And even the ministry here had supported when the matter came to our attention. So it's truly unfortunate. On the matter of racism, the government of the People's Republic of China has indicated publicly that, that any such actions taken will be punished by force of law. They are not supported, they are not state-sponsored. We have given our students and teachers the guidance to remain within their areas of comfort, the shopkeepers, neighborhoods, etc., that they know, so as to ensure that they're not in vulnerable situations as best as possible. But thankfully, we have not been getting any reports, apart from this gentleman, about Jamaicans who feel that they have been who have been treated badly as a result of racism. We know that there are persons who have had their pay affected, as have everyone across China. And we understand those situations are being regularized now as the country goes back to normal. And we know that students have had tough situations as a result of the lockdown, but we know that they're all getting back to normal. We know that Jamaicans came home when they felt it was too much, and they are with their families now. And I suppose some are contemplating whether they will return, and others will probably be making arrangements to continue their schooling here. But again, just some research and fact-checking, even the most basic of questions before publishing stories, would help in understanding those circumstances. On the question of the total sum allocated, we have not allocated emergency funding for the pandemic. What we've been doing is asking our missions to indicate to provide a budget based on the needs that have been communicated to them and the circumstances which they have been able to negotiate, whether through Airbnb or through low-budget hotels where the issue is accommodation, and to provide funding for food, again, within circumstances where it has become necessary. So we are provided with a budget which is approved, and we're provided with names and numbers, etc., and then the money is allocated. So at a permission, I would have to get that. I'd have to get where we are today, because it's done per mission and per request. It's not that I've said, here is X number of dollars to be provided, and you spend it as you wish. It's been, we need this, we have this number of Jamaicans who have this particular need. They have lost their contract here, or they've lost their accommodation as a result of X. We have negotiated the cost of whatever per night, and we're proposing X as a cost of food for 3 meals a day, and then on that basis we approve and allocate. So at another occasion, I can ask my permanent secretary to just provide an up-to-date quantification for that purpose, of the monies expended to date for that purpose. Thank you, Mr. President.
Just a follow-up, President. Minister, would you be kind enough, whether this evening at the press conference or on Monday, to share that information with the nation as to how much we have spent to assist? I don't think it can be a figure that is outside of the grasp of the efficient permanent secretary not to be aware. But in terms of follow-up to thing, you said, Minister, that the ships had certain obligations, sanitation, protocols, all of these things. But there are 2 ships, 2 cruise lines involved, the Mariella Discovery 2, which came in, and the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. Could you tell us which of these 2, because the Royal Caribbean consolidate, could you tell us which of these 2, if any? Well, I know it has to be one or both. Could you tell us which of these whether both of these have been derelict, I was going to use another word, derelict in meeting the requirements of the government of Jamaica, which has caused the delay in the return of our citizens? Because it appeared to me the government saying, in typical Shaggy style, it wasn't me. Then is who?
Mr. President, I did not say the words which appear to have been imputed or the impression created based on what the Senator just said. Let me just make that clear. It is, Mr. President, this is why I have to do my deep breathing before Senate, Mr. President, and I didn't reach all the way to 10. I tried to get to 10.
There was a previous Minister of Foreign Affairs who would have said, "No, answer that," but I'm not.
Mr. President.
Exactly where I'm talking.
Mr. President, I am not alleging that any cruise line in particular has been recalcitrant in providing the information. There have been discussions, negotiations, and requests, and the information does not always come within the time that is requested. Some things, so Mr. President, and of course you recognize that the circumstances are also entirely different as between the shipping lines just mentioned. Mr. President, I had indicated that the intention was not to focus on the shipping lines today for obvious reasons. And I don't wish to be drawn into any fine points which will then be exploited at any later occasion. The fact is, and as the Prime Minister has made clear, that we have been in negotiations with the shipping lines for the return of our nationals. We have been in negotiations. I simply shared some of the elements which are required for our certainty and around the safe return of our nationals and their repatriation. I did not make any allegation in respect of any line, and these I sought merely to explain the complexity of the discussions that have had to take place and that continue, and not with 2 shipping lines, but across, I think it is approximately 10 shipping lines with whom we have had to be engaged across more than 100 ships. So I share, Mr. President, the complexity of the issue, and not to allege any recalcitrance or breach, although the complexity itself speaks for the opportunity for delay.
President, I thank the Minister for saying none of the 2 lines that I have mentioned were involved. I thank her for saying that. Unfortunately, if someone look back at Ansard, the audio tape or the audio visual tape, they may draw a different conclusion. But that's for them. I don't want to go there. I just want to make it clear, Mr. President, that as we go forward and the government, the opposition lends you our support, it's important that we communicate clearly and precisely so people can understand. It's also important, Mr. President, that in so doing, we recognize the importance to our democracy of a free press. The barring of the press at airports and seaports cannot be good for our democracy. And the support,
Mr. President,
the support we offer the government includes the utmost respect for the democratic process of our country. Freedom of the press. Freedom of the press. Freedom of the press.
On a point of order, What is freedom of the press?
On a point of order, Mr. President.
Senator Brown, thank you.
The Senator is misleading the Senate, as the press have not been barred from any area of any of the ports, whether air or sea, that they would normally have access to, Mr. President. They have no access to the areas on any normal day that they have not been allowed access to now. And furthermore, Mr. President, these areas are akin to being admitted to a hospital as people are kept in quarantine, whether at home or in the government. They have no right, and privacy of people must be protected, Mr. President. The press have not been barred, and that was a misleading statement and must be withdrawn.
No, Mr. President.
Freedom of the press. Freedom of the press.
Senator.
Withdrawn, Mr. President, because this is inaccurate.
The point of order. The point of order. The point of order has been. The point of order. The point of order has been heard and clearly accepted by the Speaker because he's not continuing. Senator Crawford.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, we were exposed today to a statement from the Minister, in particular the Minister of Foreign Affairs, as it relates to foreign nationals being returned. It is therefore, I believe, Mr. President, not within the...
Sorry, just by way of guidance, not foreign nationals.
Sorry, Jamaican nationals, being returned. It is therefore, in my opinion, Mr. President, not within the ambit of the Minister to suggest that the ships are not for consideration or conversation today, because on those ships are Jamaican nationals seeking to be returned. I am somewhat as well, Mr. President.
Senator Crawford, you have to ask a question, you know.
I'm asking. No. Well, let me ask a question, Mr. President. Let me ask a few questions, Mr. President. The first question I would like to ask, Mr. President, is if the Minister is aware of the level of anxiety being experienced by persons. I want to ask my question. You said I should ask my question. Allow me.
Senator Crawford, address me.
Yes,
the
Mr.
first
President.
question you want to ask is
Yes,
if the Minister is aware of the anxiety.
Is the Minister aware of the anxiety being faced by those who are stuck at sea?
Minister cannot speak on somebody
Well, the Minister could have been made aware by a medical practitioner. So therefore, the Minister's awareness isn't based on her own knowledge. The Minister could have been made aware. Is the Minister also aware?
Senator Crawford.
On a point of order, Mr. President.
Have a seat for me, please.
On a point of order, Mr. President.
Sorry, no, please, just allow me. No, Senator Crawford, sit down good enough, please. Look here. The member is entitled to ask the Minister questions which are relevant and within the purview of the Minister. So he is entitled to do so without interruption. Yes, Senator Crawford.
Thank you, sir, because if the Minister is so aware, If the minister is so aware.
Senator Skeffrey, the member is entitled to ask the question without interruption. It's a point of order, Senator Crawford. Yes?
Mr. President, because the comment, even from yourself, the questions that are allowed are stated in the standing orders. And if I were to refer to the standing order, which is 16G8, Mr. President.
Senator Crawford, sit down properly, please.
Which says that you can ask questions, it limits the questions to asking whether statements in the press of private individuals or unofficial bodies are accurate. No, that you cannot ask those questions. So, how are you asking a question? How does he ask a question? On what basis is that question being asked?
Okay.
Of the person's medical position.
Give it to me.
Come on, man.
Look, let me tell you something. The standing orders are clear and the member no doubt is aware of them, but there is the ultimate sanction because the Minister in our intelligence may choose to answer the question or not. Proceed.
Yeah, but Mr. President, with due respect, Mr. Minister, Mr. President, Mr. President, in answering my colleague's question, the minister stated that the Prime Minister at his time will answer 2 questions about the ships. Now, if there is an acknowledgement of anxiety, then that cannot be a reasonable statement. When we are hearing that persons are killing themselves on the ship, have you heard that? We are hearing that persons are jumping over into the water. How can it not be an appropriate time for immediate answers to be given if those questions are known? If the answers are known by the minister, then the minister should be willing to provide those answers with immediate effect, not waiting on the Prime Minister to have his press conference.
Senator Crawford.
That is not a reasonable position.
Senator Crawford. Senator Crawford. Senator Crawford. Senator Crawford.
Senator Crawford. Minister's purview of when he wants to do his PR announcement is not a reasonable way for people who want information now.
There is a point of order you need to take.
Because there's no order over there. They are adopting the question.
Senator Crawford, there is a point of order.
You taking it, Charlie? It's a misleading statement to say that persons are killing themselves on with ship.
I must tell you that I haven't heard the question. I haven't heard the question.
Where's the evidence of that?
Senator,
you must read, man.
No, Senator Crawford, you can't do that. There's a point of order. I need to rule on it. You can't be just jumping up like that. 1 minute. Senators, you had something to say?
The assertion and the comments made earlier were misleading the Senate and bringing the Senate into disrepute, Mr. President, and rule on the matter.
Senator Crawford.
The statement made by Senator Crawford in his question about persons dying on ship and jumping off is misleading the Senate as it has no relation to Jamaicans on board, and it is misleading and bringing the Senate into disrepute and must be withdrawn, Mr. President. I await your ruling.
Senator Crawford, you are required to ask the minister a question. That is what you are entitled to do. You are embarking on a frolic of your own, and I'm not going to allow it. If you have a question to ask the minister, ask.
Mr. President, I never noted where the persons who have been injured are from.
But I've never asked you anything about that. I say if you have a question to ask,
Mr. President, let me
it.
answer to you, sir. Mr. President.
Answer to me. Ask the minister a question.
In the statement, the minister says that the ministry becomes valued interlocutor, problem solver, facilitator, and care provider. And it mentioned as well psychological impacts that have been faced. So if it is that it is within this statement.
So what is the question?
Well, I'm saying, sir.
No, I don't want to know what you are saying. I want to know what you're asking. What is the question?
I am asking why should the persons facing anxiety for information
Mr. President,
wait on the Prime Minister to speak
a point of order,
if the Minister
Mr.
have the answers to the question asked by Senator Brown. Senator Brown says,
thank you.
When?
A point of order, Mr. President.
I hear the question. Point of order. I hear the question.
Speaking as a professional who deals with anxiety, Senator Crawford, let me clarify the point of order.
Senator Longmore.
The point of order is that the senator is requesting of the minister to answer something that she cannot. Because that in a professional capacity, you cannot stand at a distance.
Interrupt a point of order with a point of order. Wait a little bit, no man.
But that's not a point of order.
I will make that decision,
You cannot request of the minister to make aspersions regarding diagnosis without the necessary conduction for such diagnosis.
Right.
And such cannot be pursued remotely. So there is no way that the minister can provide such an answer at this time.
So the question, as I understand it, Minister, is why are you not speaking to the anxiety of the status of the passengers and you are leaving it for the Prime Minister to answer?
But Mr. President, I'm not finishing.
What do you mean you're not finished? You not ask the question.
No, I have questions, Mr. President.
I'm taking the question one at a time. So the first question is, why are you leaving it to the Prime Minister to discuss?
But Mr. President, with due respect, Mr. President, Senator Brown was allowed to ask all his questions.
But he was putting them in a succinct manner. You're not doing that.
Yeah.
So if you ask them in a succinct way...
I'm not being allowed to speak, Mr. President. I'm not being allowed to be any type of ink at all. Right? So therefore, Mr. President...
All right, so here, listen to it now. I hear what you are saying.
Yes.
So the first question you asked it already. What is the second question you want to ask?
Okay, Mr. President, thank you very much. I want to know from the minister, when was the minister herself or the government aware that there were persons, Jamaican nationals, stuck at sea on cruise ships in particular?
Good. That's question number 2.
Right.
Number 3 now. No, Senator Brown, you are interrupting the question, I know.
Question 3, sir.
Go on.
Would it be reasonable, Mr. President, I'm asking the minister, would it be reasonable for the public and the Senate to assume that at latest the government was aware on the 2nd of April that Jamaicans were stuck at sea?
Number 3. Senator Fraser Binns. Senator Fraser Binns. All right, Senator Crawford, you asked the question, right? Listen to the answer here now, rather than engaging Fraser Binns.
Mr. President, without seeking to express any medical opinion, it is clear that the government, whether through the Prime Minister, myself, or other representatives, have expressed our concern that nationals overseas must be experiencing anxiety. And this has been expressed publicly in respect of our nationals at sea and at land. We have expressed our concern about this, and we have asked for patience and understanding because of the number of persons and the fact that repatriation requires logical, controlled, and phased re-entry that does not overwhelm our public health system. We have
said that before.
Yes, okay. So I am repeating that, Mr. President. It has been stated in different fora, and I wanted that, therefore, to be clear. My reference to my exclusion of a broad reference to nationals at sea was because, and I explained it in my response to Senator Brown, that the Prime Minister
Minister,
will
with the
speak in
greatest
more
of respect,
detail.
you said that already, you don't have to
Yes,
say it
Mr.
again, so
Mr.
they can
President,
ask the
I'm
question.
making
All
it-
you have to say is you're not answering that.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'm making it clear. I'm making it clear for the record, Mr. President. And why I'm making it clear, Mr. President, is because I do not wish there to be room for misinformation and mischief. Because, Mr. President, even as the opposition is calling for unity in one breath, they are, through statements such as just made by Senator Crawford in the guise of a question, creating mischief and causing for spreading of misinformation.
No.
Because
Point of order.
Mr. President, point of order.
Mr. President, point of order.
1 minute. What's the point of order? Senator Fraser Binns. Point of order.
Mr. President, the minister, who is normally very measured in her words, have said something to which I must take offense. Mr. President, I'm speaking to you. Yes. Mr. President, for the minister to say, Fraser Binns, for the minister to say that the opposition has been making statements which do not help the process, I think that is irresponsible, and I think she ought to withdraw it. The opposition, Mr. President.
Right. 1 minute.
Mr. President.
The point of order being?
The point of order is that she is offending Standing Order 35. She imputed motive, and she needs to withdraw it.
Mr. President,
The mic.
sorry, no, Mr. President.
The observation frame does not in itself amount to a point of order, but I have heard the observation, and no doubt the minister has, and as someone who you pointed out uses her words in a very measured manner, I ask her to continue.
No, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, because
Mr.
certainly taking my words out of context when explaining about refreshment on a flight, speaking about people jumping off ships, and I will just state for the record because I think it is irresponsible. I know there is a video being circulated on social media by a member of this Honourable Senate, and it has been further circulated by others, which has, and let us call it an informal conversation with somebody who makes allegations about Jamaicans jumping off ships and committing suicide, which does nothing but cause anxiety.
Mr. President, no, Mr. President,
and it
Mr.
is
President, Mr. President,
it is irresponsible.
Mr. President, on a point of order.
No, Mr. President,
Mr. President,
it is irresponsible.
Mr. President,
and in fact, I
Mr.
think
President.
I actually
Mr.
think the
President,
constabulary should look
order,
into
Mr.
whether
President.
it rises to public
Mr.
mischief,
President.
for
Mr.
which
President.
it should be charged and prosecuted.
Mr. President, point of order.
You
Mr.
think it's a
President.
joke? People
Point of
don't take
order.
these
Thank you,
things
Minister.
seriously.
Thank you, Minister. There is a point of order.
Yeah, because let me tell you something. No, me have my point of order. Because this constant hiding behind.
No, Senator
Yes, Mr.
Crawford.
President.
What is the point of
The
order?
minister.
What is the point of
The
order?
minister suggested untruthfully that I said Jamaicans were jumping off ships.
She never said that.
She said.
Senator.
She said.
She did not. Minister. Senator
Mr.
Crawford.
President,
Senator Crawford.
No, well, Mr. President, let me make it clear. There is reports in the media of individuals working on a ship.
Senator Crawford. If you have a point of order, make it. I never heard the minister say that, you know. I heard the minister say that there is no insinuation is not going to help me now.
In this house.
All right, Senator Crawford. She never said that.
All right, can I have my questions answered then, sir?
Minister, continue with the question, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just to say that, you know, it is unfortunate when things are said and done. You know, I recall even when the outbreak was taking place in Wuhan, all the way earlier this year, in January, it seems so long ago. And there were students who were so distressed that persons were spreading things which were not true, which were causing their families distress. So they had to be expending emotional energy that they needed to keep their own self together and in a good positive frame of mind, to be trying to calm their parents at home because of things that they were hearing. And I just think we have got to be responsible. We've got to be responsible. Mr. President, my counterpart on an interview, even if it was last night, the night before, was again repeating that as if it were a fact that the government is disjointed because Minister Tufton said he didn't know a ship was coming. Even after we had clarified that no one expected a ship to be coming because we were in negotiations, and yet it's put forward as and positioned as some sort of, it's mischief causing, it's taking matters out of context, and creating mischief. And it is not helpful in a crisis. It creates anxiety for people who legitimately otherwise have concerns. And it is just really, really, really sad, Mr. President. Really, and Mr. President, I just want to say that in respect of the specific question about being aware of nationals at sea, I cannot give a specific date to that.
President, I asked a second question. I asked a question if it is reasonable to assume that at latest, the 2nd of April, when the Marilla communicated, the government was aware that there were persons stuck at sea. Is it reasonable to assume that when you got a report that there were some stuck at sea, that you were then aware? Is it reasonable?
Mr. President, I cannot say what he may deem to be reasonable or not, but certainly we were aware by the call of the Marella that right through the ship's agent that there were seafarers, Jamaican seafarers at sea.
Thank you. Next
Thank
question.
You, sir. Now, in the statement, the minister suggested that at the 21st of April, conversations were being had with the, in a statement, conversations were being had with the cruise ship lines. Is there a reason between the 2nd of April and 19 days later, the 21st of April, why there was this delay before communication was engaged with the cruise ships?
Mr. President, I'm not even clear on what he's asking because it's different shipping lines, different negotiations, different discussions, different circumstances entirely. So I'm not clear on what comparison it is he's seeking to make. I'm not clear on the question.
Mr. President, I can be corrected, Mr. President.
Senator Brown and Senator Fraser-Binns are trying to assist you. Just take a deep breath and ask the question you want to ask.
Well, Mr. President, it is...
Don't allow that. I'm not allowing that. Ask the question that you have to ask.
It was suggested in this House that engagement with cruise lines in general started on the 21st of April. The minister, and well, you can correct yourself when your time. The minister also suggested, Mr. President, that they would have been aware at latest on the 2nd of April. I'm asking why was the delay for 19 days later, and if that is not so, when did communication and engagement start with the shipping companies as it relates to carrying home our nationals to Jamaica?
Mr. President, again, I will just repeat that the matters are entirely, the Senator is conflating issues, which is making it difficult to render an accurate answer, because there is no accurate question. The first point that I want to make is that the government has not said that it started negotiations with the cruise lines on the 21st. What we did clearly state is that our first formal communication with the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, which owns the ship currently in port in Falmouth, was on the 21st. So our first formal letter to RCCL asking for exploration of ways in which we can repatriate our nationals was on the 21st. That is a particular cruise line, a particular letter.
But I understand that.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am not clear on what else he is asking, because the truth is, I know I've been clear earlier in stating that we've been dealing with more than 10 shipping lines that have more than 100 ships all over the globe, and I'm talking from Australia literally to the Norwegian Sea, and with Jamaicans on them. And if it is that the Senator cannot understand that it would take time, that you respond to, not only respond to requests, but you make outreach, and you're dealing with an entire outbreak here. If he cannot understand the complexity of what I have explained earlier, then there is no answer that I can give today that will help him.
Senator, you want to move on?
Yes, sir, because I need more understanding, sir. I need greater understanding. So, Mr. President, consistently I hear the minister speak to 10 cruise lines and 100 and whatever, more than 100 ships, right? Seeking to give the impression of the difficulty of the task. Has the government taken the direction of speaking to the 100 ships or speaking to the 10 cruise lines? I would like to know that, because the minister continue to speak to, clearly. The minister seems like she have complicated it by speaking to the 100 ships instead of speaking to the 10 cruise lines to organize the 100 ships.
Thank you very much. You have another question.
So the complication seems to be a government-centered complication.
Senator Crawford. All right. Any other questions? Senator Skeffrey.
No, the President ruled.
Senator Skeffrey. Senator Skeffrey.
Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to shift the focus from the ship, so I'm not going there. The statement spoke about 9,000 Jamaicans that have registered to return home under this control protocol. My question is from this number, Minister. I have a keen interest for our students. From this, how many are students? So how many students have so registered to return home? And secondly, how many students have returned home thus far by way of the government's initiative? So I want to clear that. You spoke about the Cubans. You spoke about the Cubans students. And I know of a number of students in Cuba. Some I've taught while I was in the classroom, and they have reached out their parents and so on. But you spoke generally about returning them home. And I asked this in the context, not just Cubans, but students generally that's going to international, study international, and it's a challenge, losing the part-time work, and it has impact. So what, in terms of how many students in Cuba, for example, are we working on to return home with this special commercial airline? And why is it taking, what are the challenges? Why you can't give a specific timeline? Or may I ask, what is a specific timeline to return these students? Cuba is probably naturally the closest neighbor. And it might be complex, but for me, to organize a chartered flight to take our students home, to me can be a complex matter.
Senator Skeffrey, very concise and clear question.
So I have 2 or 3. And I have two follow.
Senator, Minister Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would have to check how many students have applied and how many are brought in, because they don't apply as a category. You don't apply as a student. Jamaicans apply, and then it's within the context of the circumstances that we are able to assess. So I would have to research that and come back to you. It's not like we're a body of persons such as the members of a ship apply and you're able to search for them as a group because of the category in which they fall. But Mr. President, I want to just indicate in respect of Cuba, the last number that I had of students who are seeking to return by virtue of the flight that's being arranged is 49. That's the last number that I had. But understand that with these circumstances, you sometimes have shifting numbers as people change their minds. Sometimes they decide to stay. Sometimes there are additional persons who decide to come. And it's an overall group of 55 because there are also some Jamaicans who had been traveling who are stranded there as well. So the number that we're working with for this flight is 55. And as I indicated, that they have they've been flagged as a priority, and we're working with health to agree a time at which they can be accommodated, because now the flight arrangements are close to complete. So that is actually one of our matters at hand. The students as a whole, that again I can't give a number, and just to indicate that in terms of, you seem to be asking why they haven't been brought home yet, if at this, given their geographic proximity. The issue being that we have had to prioritize, because as I said at the outset, the fundamental is our quarantine and isolation capacity, and therefore what we tried to do was bring in our most dire hardship cases. So even in Cuba, where persons express, and you have seen it in the statement put out by the scholarship students, we know that the Cuban government had been working very hard to protect the interests of our Jamaicans there, and the embassy was working to support where those gaps existed. So far as it was our understanding, they were all provided with accommodation. They had food, even if it is that some of them didn't like the food, and there were challenges in terms of, because it just seemed to focus on that issue, and that there are certainly issues in respect of anxiety about the situation in Cuba that they self-funded students expressed. The scholarship students were an entirely different category and had a different approach. And as a government, we not only had to work through those circumstances, but also ensure that we were assuring the Cuban government, who, of course, as you are aware, have provided us with more than 100 workers to support our COVID, healthcare workers to support our COVID response, that they too, they were a bit concerned about some of the reports that were in the media here that seemed to be stating that the government was not in fact carrying out their responsibilities towards our students. And we certainly would not have wished to give that impression either, because we know that it is not what, certainly what would have been intended. So we've been managing that circumstance from a bilateral relation as well as with the actual priority of needs. And again, as I shared publicly in another space recently, the persons who came home on the most recent flights that we organized were persons in the most dire of circumstances. We're speaking of persons who are being treated for cancer. We're speaking of persons who lost children, grandchildren, persons who themselves were separated from persons who they give care to in Jamaica and who are now in vulnerable situations, to whom they needed to return to give care, persons who no longer had a roof over their head, and that the government was now paying for them to be in low budget accommodation, persons for whom we were providing food subsistence. So where the students are accommodated and are receiving 3 meals a day, they were not going to be received before persons who did not have those circumstances. And that is how we have had to manage in terms of prioritizing our repatriation.
Mr. President, just a follow-up on this one. So, Minister, would I be correct if I draw the conclusion that as of today, the government doesn't have a specific timeline in terms of when it wants to return to all our students, especially those that the parents are stressed and have the anxiety that you just spoke about? Because the statement is, in my mind, is still general. What I want to, and the mothers and fathers out there would want to be clear that my son or my daughter will return by mid-June, end of June. So we have some timeline to manage the stress, Senator Longmore. But if you just have it in limbo, then it continues to linger on. So what I want from you as the minister, to give us a timeline, despite the challenges and the priority listing. Because even as a priority listing, you have priority A, B, C, and D, and you must reach D at some point in time. So we have started this priority listing from March. We are coming to the end of May. So where are we along the priority listing? How many priority listings you have? And worst case scenario, when will we bring home all our students that have expressed the desire to return home? 1st of September, December for Christmas, we need to know. So let's be specific to the country and start speaking these general terms, because we all understand that COVID presents unusual circumstances. We all understand that. And we all can use the notion that there are complex issues. But amidst the complexity, Mr. President, we need to put a plan and share it with the country.
Senator Skeff,
as we want.
We're running a bit long on this, but I
have two closing questions.
I hear the question you just asked the minister. Can you give a timeline as to when all the students will be at?
Regretfully, I cannot, Mr. President.
Okay. You spoke about in follow-up on the question that Senator Brown asked about the money allocated, and while you spoke about different budgets and so on. But as I understand, budgeting and money is never unlimited. Has the ministry put aside a specific sum, allocated a sum for this initiative? Of course, if you need more, you will go to the Ministry of Finance. But is it that everybody does send in a budget, and how do you guide them? As I understand budgeting, so you ask everybody to give a budget, but you don't want unusual expectation. So is it that you have 10 million, 20 million for these initiatives thus far? When you have exhausted it, then we know where next to go. And the final one for me, and the issue of the telethon. You spoke about having another one.
Sorry, on the instance of what?
The telethon. Yeah, you spoke about having one to gain.
That's not within the ministry.
Yes, in the statement. Yeah, man. The minister is organizing one for fundraising. Yeah, the minister said it in the statement. Organize. Mr. President, I will not divert. No. But what I'm saying, to get the confidence of us all to buy into this one again. We had one recently, and to the best of my information, we have not presented a report to the country as to how much total earn, the expenditure, and so on. So if you want this to be a feature for fundraising, when you have them, we must present a comprehensive report. So I ask to you, Mr. President, to the Minister, where are we with the issue of accountability and transparency in terms of the expenditure statement and the previous one to the people of Jamaica?
Thank you, Senator Skerfer. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me first say that while I've been here, I was able to confirm that the amount which has been provided to missions in Washington, New York, and Miami is the equivalent of 30,000 United States dollars. So not a profligate amount in the circumstances. In total, and that has been accounted for based on requests, quantification of need, and our assessment and approval of that circumstance done at the technical level. I had only given the policy approval for this to be implemented. That is, that we did need to allocate unusual expenditure. There is no specific budget for emergency response, and that is the answer to that question. In respect of the telethon, which has been organized by led, the organization for which has been led by the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. I know she gave a statement to the House some time ago, which had reported on the initial earnings at the time, which was 50 million. And I know the ministry had been mobilizing to use the content to seek to raise additional funding. And so I will ask her to provide an update on that matter to the public of Jamaica, I presume to the other place in which she serves at the appropriate time. The telethon to which I referred to is being organized in Canada by the Jamaica Canadian Association, other diasporic associations, supported by and endorsed by our High Commission and Consulate there.
Thank you, Minister. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House today, laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Annual Report of the National Products Limited, NPL, for the year 2018-2019. National Housing Trust, Housing Benefits, Silver Sun Housing Development Order.
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk. You need to start again because you do not have the attention of the members of the Senate who seem to be intent on grumbling while you are speaking. So please continue. Go ahead, please, Madam Clerk. Please start from the start.
Today, a copy of the following. Annual Report of the National Products Limited, NPL, for the year 2018-2019. National Housing Trust, Housing Benefits, Silver Sun Housing Development Order 2020 under the National Housing Trust Act. National Housing Trust, Housing Benefits, Ruthven Towers Housing Development Order 2020 under the National Housing Trust Act.
Thank you very much. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 19th day of May 2020, a bill entitled An Act to Protect the Privacy of Certain Data and for Connected Matters was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Pernell P. Charles, CD, JPMP, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Who's taking charge of the bill? Who's taking charge of the bill?
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
Thank you, Minister.
A bill shortly entitled the Data Protection Act 2020 read a first time.
Mr. President, I ask for second reading of the bill.
Thank you very much, Minister.
No.
I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, motions that may be made, notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next sitting of the Senate, I will move the following motions. Be it resolved that the National Housing Trust, Housing Benefits, Silver Sun Housing Development Order 2020 under the National Housing Trust Act, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 22nd day of May 2020, be referred to the Regulations Committee of the Senate for consideration and report. Be it resolved that the National Housing Trust, Housing Benefits, Ruthven Towers Housing Development Order 2020 under the National Housing Trust Act, which was laid on the table of the Senate on the 22nd day of May 2020, be referred to the Regulations Committee of the Senate for consideration and report. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions.
Thank you very much, Senator Williams. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, while it feels like we have already had a full debate in this chamber, it in fact remains for us to take the sole item on the agenda of public business for today, which is the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Financial Holding Companies Order Resolution 2020.
You weren't going to deal with Senator Williams' motion? But you said that it's only one item of business. Yeah. So you can take it after. Yeah. And that will ensure that he remains with us anyway.
Mr. President, the resolution just mentioned will be followed by us taking the resolution of which Senator Williams just gave notice. Mr. President, today I seek the affirmation of the Senate of the Terrorism Prevention Designated Reporting Entity Financial Holding Companies Resolution Order 2020. The resolution seeks to give effect to the accompanying order dated May 6, which in turn imposes certain reporting obligations on financial holding companies under the Terrorism Prevention Act 2005 as amended by the Terrorism Prevention Amendment Act 2019, which we passed in November last year. Mr. President, in 2017, we affirmed resolutions in similar terms in respect of real estate dealers, casino operators, accountants, some gaming operators. In November 2019, a fifth order was affirmed in relation to attorneys at law practicing in Jamaica and carrying out certain activities on behalf of their clients. And the order before us today will then be the sixth in this regime under the TPA. Mr. President, I'll give some background to the resolution, which will in some ways serve as a reminder of the context within which the earlier orders were passed in this chamber. Mr. President, Section 15.2 of the Terrorism Prevention Act provides that certain entities must determine on a continuous basis whether they are in possession or control of property owned or controlled by or on behalf of a listed entity. And I remind this House that a listed entity is a designated terrorist entity, so designated by the UN Security Council or by order of the Supreme Court. And members of this honorable chamber would recall the discussions that we had about that and the amendments we made to expand the process by which that can be undertaken. Mr. President, the entities that must continuously make this determination are: 1, foreign companies doing business in the financial sector in Jamaica, and it's in relation to banking, securities, insurance, investment advice or trusts, and this is under clause 15.2a, Jamaican financial institutions at large, and that's under 15.2b, as well as entities designated by the minister by order under 15.2c. So, Mr. President, it's intended today to bring financial holding companies under the Terrorism Prevention Act regime pursuant to 15.2c as entities which have corporate responsibility for the development and implementation of group-wide anti-money laundering or terrorist financing prevention, policies and procedures for the group of companies for which the entity forms part. This will essentially, Mr. President, mirror the category set out in paragraph 1.1a of the 4th schedule of the POCA. Mr. President, Section 15.3 and Sections 16.1 to 16.3 of the Act stipulate additional reporting obligations regarding property held by listed entities, complex, unusual, or large transactions, and transactions suspected to be for the benefit of a terrorist group or listed entity. And by way of a reminder, Mr. President, the UN list of designated terrorist entities is available under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, and it is kept current. Mr. President, the importance of this matter to us, before us today, has been affirmed by the Bank of Jamaica. The Bank of Jamaica is the designated competent authority under both the POCA and the TPA for deposit-taking institutions under the Banking Services Act. So commercial banks, merchant banks, building societies, as well as cambios, credit unions, remittance agents, and agencies. So the BOJ has advised that their new rules promulgated under the Banking Services Act now allow for full regulatory regime of financial holding services to be fully implemented. Save, however, Mr. President, that designation under the TPA is also required to give this, this element its due accord. The Bank of Jamaica also monitors FHCs already in respect of group-wide AML CFT policies, anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism policies and procedures. However, the specific reporting obligations provided for under the TPA are also required for them to ensure the most effective regulation and monitoring framework. So designation by way of this order will create those obligations. Also, Mr. President, also importantly, affirming this order will be another action demonstrating Jamaica's commitment to the international standards set by the Financial Action Task Force and, of course, the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force, which is a regional monitoring organization. More directly, the order needs to take effect and to be implemented as part of the framework through which Jamaica will ensure it continues to meet its international obligations. As we're now aware, Mr. President, despite significant legislative and administrative reforms to Jamaica's AML CFT regime, implemented even as recently as last year when we sought to complete all of the tasks that were needed as a result of the 2015 assessment, which had generated the 2017 report under which work was being undertaken. So, Mr. President, notwithstanding all that work, further to a new threshold put in place based on size of economy by the FATF, Jamaica was moved into a category of countries under the direct monitoring of the FATF. So no longer CFATF monitored, we are now directly FATF monitored, which has a different scope of obligations and of assessment. So on the 21st of February of this year, the FATF, during its plenary meeting, placed the country on its grey list, as we're all aware, and the minister, I believe, Minister Clark, gave a statement to the House on this very early in its nascence. And in response to that placement, Mr. President, the country agreed to a time-bound action plan to address the deficiencies identified and the tasks to be accomplished. Jamaica also gave a high-level political commitment to complete the action plan within the agreed timelines, and that is by September 2021. So, but we start now. An interagency task force, which is coordinated by the Bank of Jamaica and chaired by the Ministry of Finance, by the minister himself, in fact, is now directing activities under the plan of action to ensure that all deficiencies are dealt with in a timely manner. Affirmation of the order before us today comprises one of the actions to be taken. So, Mr. President, I'll just very briefly turn to the resolution and order, the scope of which I've already explained, simply to note that it will take effect when the order is affirmed by both Houses of Parliament and gazetted, and also that, of course, the designation will make reporting entities liable to report also to the FID whether they are in possession or control of property owned or controlled by or on behalf of listed entities. And as explained earlier, the listed entities are all on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website. I believe it's on. It's also available through others, through other websites, but we can attest to this one being kept current. Mr. President, having given the background to the order and a synopsis of its effect, and having emphasized the importance of its implementation, I now invite members of this Honourable Senate to support the resolution before us. I thank you.
Thank you. Minister is invited. Comments? Any presentation? Senator Brown.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Minister.
President. Mr. President, when the clerk sent out the agenda for today, I recognize that there's really one substantive issue, which was the small order. And therefore, I thought that with a Senate starting at 10 o'clock, by 11 o'clock, we would all be gone.
Make it to 1 o'clock if you move quickly into the substance of your presentation.
I have no such plan to move quickly, sir. Suffice it to say that the opposition supports the order. As the minister said, it's the sixth in a series of such orders taken. I recall the last set, there was some rush, some urgency involved. And we did make the comment then that we believe we should set out a timetable of the things that must be done. The minister said there's more action to be taken going into 2021. And it would be good if you could share with us here and in the other place that set of thing, so we could help remind you and your hard-working staff who's taken up a lot with COVID, that the timetable approaches, that the time frame in which action must be done approach, so that we can be part of the monitoring of doing what needs to be done to keep Jamaica in good grace. You might have alluded to it, Minister, but it wasn't clear, that just last week or the week before, there's an announcement that the Financial Action Task Force had grade listed us, and we were blacklisted elsewhere because they felt we were not in accord with what they desire. The minister has said it is they who have made the change on us, because they now take our economic situation into account and say we have graduated. But the reality is that we are blacklisted, we are grey listed, we are seen in a negative light in the world, and it is in our hands to correct that. The Bank of Jamaica have said they will seek to complete all the things by next year. But again, we say, you owe it to us, legislators, to give us a list of the actions that needs to be taken so that we can monitor it. I've said that before. The other point we want to make, another point we want to make, Minister, is this is part of a global arrangement. And we are compelled to honor these global obligations. But unfortunately, it appears that we are compelled, but others are at will to disregard the global arrangements. I speak, for example, of the WHO, an agency that has given us good guidance in this hour of difficulty of COVID. But others in the world feel free to withdraw funds, financial support from the WHO, to threaten to leave the WHO and to leave the world in a worse place. And to leave the world in a worse place, because health affects our economy, and our economy affects the Financial Action Task Force activity. So I want to know, are these global arrangements, is the assessment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that these global arrangements, climate change, all of these things can withstand the hostility of one of the world's key players. Can make no bones about it. The attitude against WHO is an hostile act against all the people of the world, and in particular the poorer countries of the world. It's not something we should condone, something we should speak out against.
Senator Brown, you could have used the next forum to speak about that still in
Mr. President, this is the forum I have.
I know this is the forum you have, but to talk about the WHO and some hostile...
I'm speaking about, Mr. President, I'm speaking about global arrangements.
Senator Brown, hear me. Just address the legislation or the motion.
Mr. President, maybe you are limited in understanding that this is part of a global arrangement. And I am speaking to global arrangements that we are going into, we are becoming part of, which may very well be tenuous.
Hear this now. My limited understanding of it, I accept my limited understanding of everything except the standing orders. So stick to the standing orders.
And that's what I'm doing. And that's what I'm doing. What we're looking at, the Minister of Finance of Jamaica, in respect to the grey listing of our country because of our non-fulfillment of the Financial Action Task Force obligations. I said that this is because of a change in our economic status. The minister said in 2019, FATF arbitrarily changed this measure to what is known, Senator Andre, as M3, which is a broader measure of the economy. This arbitrary change meant that for the first time Jamaica exceeded the US $5 billion threshold. So there's a connection to how global arrangements operate. And this order we have. And it is our duty as opposition to point out to the government the need to make sure the economic things are in sync. And in this respect, President, given what the minister have said, and given the impact of COVID on the country, and the calamity that faces our economic reality, we need to find out whether or not the prediction by the governor of the Bank of Jamaica, where he has moved from a negative 3% decline in the economy for this year to 4 to 7% decline, and specifically saying we're at 5.1, whether that will change the status of Jamaica under the FATF situation, under the Financial Task Force situation. And would that mean that Jamaica would no longer be grey listed or blacklisted? So, Mr. President, you may not see the connection to the severe economic pressures we face. Severe economic pressures which will show up in poverty, greater poverty, up in great unemployment, which is showing up in greater hardship for the people. I see the need to support us fulfilling the obligations that this order asks. But I also want to know whether or not the serious economic reality that faces us, and for which the government has not been addressing sufficiently, You have focused on the public health side. But beyond the public health, there's a serious economic reality of increased poverty, increased unemployment, increased crime, increased hardship on our people. And I wonder if all of that is taken into account when we look at our obligations to the FATF. The reality as I close, Mr. President, is our people are suffering. Suffering psychologically, Senator Crawford. Whether they be on the ship or off the ship, the psychological impact is rough on our people. And the economic hardship is great. May it please you, Mr. President. And I'm through before 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, certainly the... Yes, Mr. President, the government is seized of the importance of the issue, and the Minister of Finance has spoken on this on several occasions, and indeed the detailed action plan that has been established for to ensure that all the relevant ministries, departments and agencies are able to implement the action plan by September 2021 is being monitored by a task force chaired by the, overseen by the Bank of Jamaica, chaired by the Minister of Finance himself, and they are working assiduously on these matters already. I want to just say in respect of the economy and the importance of the management of economy and crime, etc., certainly the government has established the Economic Task Force, which is populated by a broad base of stakeholders and business persons and government, as well as a new economy task force, which focuses more on the digital side of opportunities which lie perhaps untapped. We know, Mr. President, as we have already discussed, that crime is down, and the government's eye continues to be down by 17%, I understand. There are no elements of crime which are up, and that is certainly the silver lining in the cloud of COVID. And the government, however, continues, and the Prime Minister remains as chair of the National Security Council, which sits and which continues to do the work to ensure that we are able to leverage the gains that are being achieved at this time, and so that they do not, in fact, that we don't lose them and lose the opportunities that present themselves. So, Mr. President, acknowledging that both the opposition and the government are in support of this order, I ask that we move for the affirmation thereof.
Membership have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Senator Williams.
Mr. President, I now ask for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
Yeah. Very professionally done there, Senator Williams. Those in favor? Against?
Okay, yeah. Mr. President, I now move that the motions, notice of which I gave earlier, be approved.
Motions that we are dealing with. The first, those in favor? Against? And the second motion, those in favor? Against? Well done, Senator Williams. Thank you. Just before I call on the minister, I just make mention of the passing of Mr. Oliver Clark, OJ. The tongue of good report has been heard on his behalf across the media landscape, and I would ask the clerk to write to Mrs. Clark and his family, indicating that the Senate has observed his passing and offering our sincere condolences. And finally, Monday is being celebrated as, Senator Morris, you wanted to say something? You may, if you wish.
President, I would want to join with you and your expressions on behalf of the opposition, and I want to say how much I recall I think it was 2002 thereabout, when he was appointed by the then Prime Minister Patterson to chair the special committee to look at the whole issue of working conditions for parliamentarians, because it was much more than looking at the salary. And one of the things coming out of the recommendation from him was to ensure that we have proper parliamentary facilities to accommodate the sittings of both the Senate and the House of Representatives, because I was one of those members who appeared before him on behalf of the Senate, Mr. President. And I tell you, he was shocked and appalled to hear and learn of the circumstances under which the parliamentarians were operating. And, you know, he made some very strong recommendations for corrective actions. And, you know, I know that the new parliamentary building is in train, or the process has started for that, but I think it would do us a great deal, because COVID has manifested that we really need a parliament, you know, to accommodate all the sittings of the Honourable Parliament. And those recommendations were long contained in the report from the Honourable Oliver Clark, and we want to express our profound condolences to this outstanding Jamaican who has given selfless service to his country, and we want to ensure that we join with you in transmitting those expressions to his wife and family. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, certainly on behalf of this side, we join our words and hearts and thoughts with those expressed by you and Senator Morris. Certainly, Oliver Clark was a giant among the business community, of the business community, and one who had a deep and abiding interest in all matters related to Jamaica and the betterment of Jamaica. I will say on a personal note that as of my appointment, certainly he sought to not only express an interest in matters related to foreign affairs, but he always sought to give an opportunity for the sharing of discussions or opportunities to discuss sensitive issues within small groupings that were appropriate for sensitization of matters that were important to Jamaica and Jamaican foreign policy, to ensure a broader understanding of issues that perhaps were too sensitive to deal with in the public domain. And I always appreciated that, because it showed a recognition of the sensitivity of the portfolio, but also his recognition of how important it was that if you had the opportunity to play a part in the careful and curated sharing of information, then this was also a part of our democracy to be celebrated. And he, Mr. President, as I said, he was a great man. He'll be well remembered. And we too on this side add our prayers for comfort and strength to Monica, to his family at large, to his daughter, and we wish them every comfort in prayer that they may find. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, please pen the appropriate missive conveying the sentiments of the Senate to his widow and family generally. The other observation I make is that Monday is being celebrated as Labor Day. I think Saturday is the official day. It is a day which used to be referred to as May Day elsewhere that we know about. But it's a time, I think, when we recognize the workers of the country. And I'm not inviting any comment from Senator Brown or Senator Gale, but we just remember on Monday the workers of the country and the tremendous sacrifice that our union leaders have made over these many years of our independence and prior to independence. So we remember them. And I noticed that Mr. Shearer's birthday was celebrated recently, talking about union leaders. Madam?
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. I therefore ask for the Senate to be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
The question is that the Senate be adjourned to a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This Honourable Senate now stands adjourned.
My people, my people, my people, many of us feel concerned or overwhelmed by what is happening